Don't forget that we're offering 2 free resources from our favorite positive reinforcement dog trainer, Irit Bloom of the Sophisticated Dog. Simply go to thisispawprint.com/ask and sign up.
Don't go out right away and buy tons of toys and all of this. There's so many things around your house that a cat will like. You put a shoebox out, and I don't care how big that cat is, that cat's going to try to squeeze into that shoebox.
This is Paw Print, an animal rescue community, episode 47. I'm Harold Ree.
And I'm Nancy Ree. Today's guest is the amazing Bunny Hofberg. Bunny founded Frankie's Feline Fund in New York City with a focus on senior cats.
When I interviewed Stephen Shalowitz, our guest for episode 40, he highly recommended that we interview Bunny Hofberg. Stephen said the entire city of New York knows Bunny and her mission of rescuing senior cats.
If you want to learn more about Bunny and Frankie's Feline Fund, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/47. That's the number 47.
I was behind the scenes working at radio stations in a couple different cities for about 37 years. I have no idea where my love of cats came from because I did not have a cat growing up. We had a kitten for about 3 days, and my mother was like, "Get this thing out of the house. It is destroying everything."
Right.
So that was my big experience growing up. We did have a dog for a little while, but never a cat. It wasn't until I was working and my younger sister was living with me going to graduate school that we decided we wanted to get some kittens. When you have never had a cat before, your natural instinct is to go get kittens. It never crossed my mind to get a cat versus a kitten. So that's kind of what started. I lived in Washington, D.C. There were giveaways in the Sunday paper. We went around the city. We found 2 kittens, couldn't agree. And we said, well, let's just get them both. That turned out to be the best thing we could do because they kept each other company while we were out of the house. We obviously had them spayed and neutered. They got along beautifully, a boy and a girl. And a year later, something happened at work and someone presented me with the option for another kitten, and I was like, oh, what the heck? And on the way to the vet, we actually picked up another kitten to keep that kitten company, because our thought was when we don't live together, one would take the older kittens and the other. There was only a year apart, but that was our mindset. So that kind of started everything. My sister ended up leaving the country, so I had the 4 cats. I moved to California for a little while, and I took them. Never crossed my mind to not take them with me. I just knew that wherever I had to live, it was going to have to be someplace that took pets. And I made that a priority. Sometimes it cost me a little extra money, a deposit, or if I lived with roommates, paying a little bit more rent, whatever it was. That's what I did. And then I actually, after a few years, went to New York. So those cats came. They did it, the long distance trip again. They went to New York. Here they come. What started me on this path was many, many years later, one of the radio stations I was working at actually was owned by Disney. Disney is, first of all, I was doing other kinds of volunteer work. I was a big sister for quite a while with one girl. Disney has a very, very big volunteer program. They are very into community and being very involved. And when I started doing things with the company, it turns out they didn't have any kind of an animal program at the time. They used to, but somehow it kind of fizzled out. And so they said to me, if you would like to find one, maybe we can do something. So I went over to the ASPCA, because I think that's who their original program was with. And I talked to them and I realized that the way their program for volunteers worked would not work for Disney, but it would work for me as an individual. And so I did it. Started off doing cat socialization, and then I went into the adoptions part of it. And they have a mobile adoption van, and we would at least every weekend, every Saturday and Sunday, and one night a week, we would go to different parts of the city, roll out the van, with cats and kittens in there and try to get them adopted. And I really, really enjoyed it. I liked working with the public. I found that I was really good at helping people find the right cat for them and everything. And that's also when I realized, after being there for a few years, the jeopardy that the senior cats are in. There's really no place. One thing about the ASPCA is they will take their animals back no matter what their age. That's the beautiful part. If you adopt a kitten and something happens 15 years later, you always know that you can take that dog or cat back, and they will try to get it adopted, or depending on its age and health, put it in a foster home. Whatever they need to do, they are responsible for that animal for its life.
You can already kind of see where this is headed, right? With a lot of older animals being returned.
I decided at that point I needed, like the song in Gypsy, you have to find a gimmick or your niche, whatever it is. And I felt that this was what was missing in the rescue community, that there was no one focusing on senior cats. Cats over the age of 7 are considered senior. It pretty much goes from kitten to maybe adult, like right to senior and geriatric and everything. So it's sad that in the mindset of people, they're already saying an animal cat 7 years old is kind of over the hill.
Right, because cats can live so much longer.
Right. Well, and that's what I try to explain to people when they want to get a kitten. I'm like, you have to understand that a kitten could be anywhere from a 15 to a 20-year commitment. So you have to be prepared for that. Maybe you should think about getting an older cat. I'm not saying that you necessarily have to get one that's 16 years old, but one that's already an adult, that the chances of you having to surrender it are probably less and everything. So that's what started me looking at everybody. It was like, some of the other no-kill shelters don't want to take their older cats back. Why hasn't somebody done something to provide a place for these animals to go? Because if you won't take your animal back, what's the option? Right. There isn't.
Yeah.
So basically, what are you telling these people, to have their animals euthanized? I'm not really sure what they think these people can do with their cats.
We're talking to Bunny Hofberg, Frankie's Feline Fund. You can find her website, frankiesfelinefund.org, and you can learn more about her organization. You can even donate if you'd like. When did you actually start to seriously focus on what we call senior cats?
When I was a volunteer at the aid, there were a group of us that became friendly because we always did the adoption events and all this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, one day, one of the girls got an email from somebody saying that someone had passed away and there were 2 cats left, and, a home needed to be found and all this kind of stuff. So we all kind of banded together and went over and met the cats. And one of our friends, one of the cats was a 16, probably a pretty old Himalayan cat. One of the girls said, I'll take him. So we got him checked out and all this, and she took him. And a little while later, another of the girls got an email from a friend. I'm having my second child. My husband doesn't want the cat anymore. Went over, got that cat. It started off as just one of these trying to help owner surrender type things, that someone died, needed a place for a cat, and they all were older cats. There wasn't any kittens. These were all older cats. So that was what kind of started, because we were always able to find them homes. I did volunteer work with another organization that helps seniors with their animals. and there was a man going into a nursing home with 7 cats. So I helped place some of those. And the more I did that, it just seemed to become clearer and clearer to me that the ASPCA could function very well without me. They have lots of volunteers and all of that, and maybe I should put my efforts where no one else really was. And also what happened is my cat Frankie was a cat that was adopted out and brought back, and it was discovered that he was diabetic. It was unbeknownst to anyone that he was, although the people that adopted didn't think that. From what I understand, a very nasty situation when they brought the cat back. At first, it was felt that maybe this was a cruelty case, so the cat was taken in. He was there for quite a while and became regulated, and then nobody really wanted him because he was diabetic and considered unadoptable. He only had a matter of days before he was going to be euthanized. A friend of mine called me to explain to me the situation, and my feeling was I was not going to let a cat be euthanized because he was diabetic. It's not his fault. I got him, and that was, I had been thinking and thinking and thinking, but then when something like this happened, I started to dabble a little bit more in the rescue. I would have other rescues pull cats from the city shelter for me, older cats. One of the first ones I pulled was a 13-year-old cat that was an owner surrender and came in thin and dehydrated. And I'm thinking to myself, how does a cat that's owned by somebody, why are they thin and dehydrated? It didn't compute to me. It's owned by somebody. Aren't they taking care of their animal? And it turned out that this cat had a thyroid condition that had been totally untreated. We tried. We never did get his thyroid under control. I have a thing for orange cats. I absolutely love orange cats. And he was an orange and white cat, and we really called him a crotchety old man. And I was so lucky, though, that my vet is near Lincoln Center, and a girl who worked there on her lunch hour would always walk by my vet's office, and one day she came in and she asked to meet him, and she fell in love with this cat. He was just like a cat she had growing up, and she didn't care that he sometimes would, nip a little or bite a little or do whatever. And she started off as a foster, and then she ended up leaving New York and going to D.C., and she adopted the cat and lived happily ever after. So, you never know what type of personality a person is looking for in a cat, because we were all sitting there going, we're never going to get this cat a home, just never. A lot of times the cat has never ever been to a vet, and then as it gets older, the owner senses there might be something going on with their cat, so instead of taking it to the vet, they dump it at the shelter. Mm-hmm. Right. And they don't tell anybody. If people would just be honest, it certainly would make life a lot simpler for rescues. But nobody wants to admit anything.
When did you officially become a 501c3? What do you remember what year that was?
2009.
Oh, okay.
I think that was I didn't have Frankie that long. I only had Frankie for a couple of years, because what also happens with many diabetic cats is they do also have other intestinal issues and everything, which he did. Toward the end, he became what they call a brittle diabetic, in that I had to constantly check his blood sugar because he would be really high, and then all of a sudden he would crash and get very, very low, and you just never knew where he was going to be and everything. And it just finally got to the point that he just was peeing everywhere. I mean, it was so sad because I didn't have him that long, and he wasn't that old. Yeah. But there were just too many things wrong. And so that was about the time that I really was getting close to making the decision to go full blown on this, and that's why I named my organization after him.
Yeah, Frankie's Feline Fund.
The reason I named him Frankie, that was not the name he came with. He was part Siamese, and he had the most gorgeous blue eyes. So of course, being older, you had to name him after Frank Sinatra.
That's right.
That was what you had to do. And about 6 months after I took him, I took another diabetic cat. I still have him.
Oh.
Yeah, and I named him Johnny. So I had Frankie and Johnny. You really have to be old to get Frankie and Johnny. But he's still with me, hanging in there, doing pretty well. Over the years, I've taken as many diabetic cats. It's hard because it's very hard to find fosters who can take in. And if the diabetic cat can't live with other cats, then it's hard for me to keep them.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I try to do what I can for them.
Maybe folks aren't really that aware of what it takes to adopt a cat. Even the basics, like how often do you feed a cat? What does it take to really just kind of take care of a cat so people understand the expectations going in?
That's what makes cats so much easier than dogs. Well, we try to explain to most people that cats should mostly be on wet food, not dry food. It's dry food that usually makes a cat fat. And almost every time I rescue a cat that is fat, or I talk to people at adoption events and they tell me, oh, my cat is, and the first thing I say is, what do you feed them? And they feed them dry food. And I'm like, well, that's why. Because if you take a fat cat, I just took a almost 30-pound cat a few months ago, and all we did was switch his diet. And he's only on wet food, and he's already lost about 5 pounds.
That's great.
Just from a change in diet. That's the first thing they tell you if your cat becomes diabetic and you've been feeding them dry food. Get them off the dry food, just wet food. So if you're only giving wet food, the cats should be fed twice a day, breakfast and dinner. Litter box, I clean mine all the time, even when I only had my personal cats and didn't have rescue cats. That was like the first thing it's like brushing your teeth. That's like one of the first things you do when you wake up. One of the first things I would do when I wake up is I would go clean the litter box because cats are going to go overnight. They're not going to stop. They will wake up, go to the litter box, and then go right back to sleep. So I also found myself just checking it before I went to work. When I worked in an office, I would check it before I left the house. And then when I come home, that would be the first thing I would do, is I would go and clean the litter box. So I myself probably was cleaning a litter box about 4 times a day. I just ask people to do it at least twice, in the morning and at night. There's so many different types of litter boxes now. There's so many different types of litters. There isn't something, you can find anything that is going to suit your lifestyle. There's plenty of people that use the automatic litter boxes that, they have a trip wire and, when the cat gets out, it it moves it and pushes it somewhere. And I myself would prefer, I know this may sound strange, but I would prefer to dig my own litter because I want to see what's going on. I feel more hands-on.
Well, yeah, I mean,
if I'm actually scooping it myself.
If you see something wrong, you'll know, right? Right, yes. And I feel like I have a little bit more control. I always tell people, don't go out right away and buy tons of toys and all of this. There's so many things around your house that a cat will like. You put a shoebox out, and I don't care how big that cat is, that cat's going to try to squeeze into that shoebox. Anybody who gets pet food delivered knows, and I can't tell you how many homes I go into where there's a box that obviously came from one of these pet supply places, and the cat now has made it into a bed. Right.
I mean, I'm as guilty as the next person. There's a box in my kitchen. I can't get rid of it. They have made it into another little bed, and I don't have the heart to, take it out. And that's what happens. So cats, to me, I have never understood when people surrender their animals their cats because they say they don't have time. to me, they don't take a lot of time. Yeah, there's socialization that needs to go on and everything, but as far as the day-to-day, how long does it take you to put some food and water down and scoop a litter box?
Right.
So the maintaining does not take a long time.
Yeah. Now, you also have a need for fosters. Can you maybe just, for folks who have never heard of the word foster when it comes to animals, what is a foster? What's the importance of fosters for your organization?
Foster homes are people who will take in temporarily one of our cats. I have all different kinds. We have short-term, long-term. I even have what I call permanent fosters. And basically what a foster does is they provide the food and the litter and a loving home. I provide all the vet care for that cat while it's in that person's home. It basically, if you would like the company of an animal, it takes the burden off of you, because a lot of times it's the vet that holds a lot of people back, because vet bills can be pretty expensive, even with pet insurance and everything. It can get kind of costly. And that's also one of the things that they're worried about when they do take in a senior. Before they know it, the senior is going to, have medical issues and going to cost a lot of money. People don't understand that young cats can get very ill also, and things can happen to them. It's not just the old cats. With me, because they are older cats, they do take a little longer to get adopted. So my fostering usually, it's not as quick as if I give you a litter of kittens. The kittens grow up and in 2 seconds they get adopted. It takes longer to get a senior cat adopted. But the benefit of it is the feedback that I get from the foster parent is so valuable in helping me find the right home for that cat. I mean, you can tell me everything about the cat, what food it likes, what habits it has, lap cat, what happens when company comes over, does the cat bond with, there's just so many things that the advantage of a foster home versus going to a shelter where a cat is in a cage and you can't always tell as much about its personality. Unfortunately, right now I'm spending quite a bit of money boarding cats because I've taken cats off the euthanasia list at the city shelters, and I didn't have a foster home, but I looked at it like, well, it's either death or I board it. So to me, boarding is the lesser of two evils here.
Right.
So that's the decision.
What would be the ideal number of fosters?
I would love to say 20 to 25 if I didn't lose my my sanity. My original thought process to this was to enlist seniors, because I met some older people who would come on to our adoption van and say, I've had cats my entire life, and I really would like to have the companionship again, but, with the cost of vet bills, I don't think I could do right by the cat. So that was my original thought. Okay, I get a senior person, I take a senior cat, I save the cat's life, I give this senior person the companionship, and we foot the bill for the vetting. And then it turns out that a lot of seniors don't want senior cats. They want kittens. And I'm like, I actually have had better luck getting my cats adopted by younger people. I would say the majority of my cats get adopted by people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. I was going after the over 60 crowd, I thought. It's hard to get them to take an older cat.
Yeah. Well, you found the right niche, 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Yeah.
Why do you think you do what you do?
When I first started, I used to call my cats the Betty Whites of the feline world. This is with all the love and respect for that woman, because I think she's a phenomenal human being. She had a comeback when she was about 88. And I try to tell people, if her family felt the same way about her that some people feel about their animals when they get older, look what we would not have seen. All the movies that she was in, the TV shows, hosting Saturday Night Live. Who went on Facebook to get her to host Saturday Night Live? I don't think it was the seniors.
Right.
You know, I mean, they don't know from Facebook. These were younger people. And that's why I have trouble with older people not wanting older animals. That's like saying to yourself, well, you don't want to be friends with someone your own age or something because, you know, do you stop making friends because they're going to die? That's another reason why I try to explain to people the beauty of getting a cat versus a kitten. The cat has a personality. You know what you're getting.
What's the best way to find you and your organization, whether it's on the website or on social media?
The website is always frankiesfelinefund.org is always a good place to start. That will also link you, I believe, to Pet Finder. Pet Finder, you can either do it under Frankie's Feline Fund or our zip code is 10023. We do have a Facebook page, Frankie's Feline Fund. I actually do get more response from Pet Finder.
Okay.
Most of these cats are abandoned. It just breaks my heart that they just look at them like they can be thrown away and that they are not considered part of the family. I moved cross-country twice with 4 cats. It never crossed my mind not to take them with me. That was my family. Never ever thought of putting them somewhere. I don't know how somebody can take an animal that you've lived with for over 10 years, sometimes over 15 years, and take them to a kill shelter where you know ultimately, most likely, what is going to happen to that animal. I don't know how you live with yourself. And so those are the ones that speak to me, that it breaks my heart. I think it was Jane Fonda who wrote a book about her 3rd chapter in her life or whatever it was, her 3rd stage. You know, there's, you know, all these stages. And why shouldn't you, as you get older, get better? Just because you reach a certain age doesn't mean that you don't have the right to be around. I mean, otherwise they'd be killing all of us. And there's value to older people, just as like there's value to older animals. They have a right to the last stage of their life to live it out in dignity. The best way that anybody can do it. And I'm going to start to cry. Because it just, I don't know how people can just throw away something they've lived with. Sorry.
It's important.
You know, it just, I feel so bad for these animals. They're so sweet. And I'll tell you, an older cat knows it's being rescued. A kitten is looking for food, whereas an older animal is looking for that love and that companionship, and it will give it back to you. Oh, I didn't think that was going to happen.
No, that was wonderful. I'm glad you shared. Hopefully people will hear you and they'll feel like it's time to act, right?
That's my goal, is to have people understand the value of these animals and that something should be done for them and not just have them get thrown away. My hope and dream is to one day, this is a big dream, have somebody donate a townhouse to me here in the city that I can turn into a senior home for these cats. Nobody has stepped up to the plate to actually have a facility where these animals can live out their lives. They're starting to pop up with homes for senior dogs and everything, you know. So I would like to one day see them do the same thing for the cats.
We want to say thank you to Bunny Hofberg for sharing her story. And we hope that her interview inspires you to support and rescue senior cats. We also want to say thank you to Stephen Shalowitz for helping us make the connection. If you want to learn more about Bunny, Frankie's Feline Fund, make a donation, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/47. If you'd like to nominate someone to be a guest on Pawprint, you can send us an email at thisispawprint@gmail.com or go to our contact page, thisispawprint.com/contact. Don't forget that we have 2 free resources from our favorite positive reinforcement dog trainer, Irit Bloom. you can go to thisispawprint.com/ask to sign up. If you'd like to meet me or Nancy on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you can look for This Is Paw Print, all one word. If you'd like to listen to more episodes of Paw Print, you can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Podcast Addict for Android phones, and our YouTube channel. Go to thisispawprint.com/YouTube to find all of our episodes. We want to say thank you for sharing Paw Print with your friends and family, and remember that you spread a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time with another great guest on Paw Print.
Paw Print is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.